So without further ado, we are going to turn this over to our man of the hour, our final and our closing keynote speaker, all the way from New York City. I'm going to read a little bit of his bio, and then Dr. Thomas and him will join us here on the stage for a fireside chat. And so Dr. Brandon Frame, I met Dr. Frame through the internet. I stalked his page on LinkedIn, and I had to put a disclosure out there and say, listen, I promise you I'm not a stalker. Like, I really have some questions for you. Can you give me 5 minutes of your time? I just want to talk to you about the work that you're doing. Typically, I get the no because they think it's a spam, but he was like, you know what? Sure. And so maybe, I don't know if it was UW, maybe it was my cute smile, I don't know what it is, but we ended up having a Zoom conversation, and he engaged my staff twice on his expertise, and we're so proud of him and the work that he's doing that I wanted to invite him to be our closing keynote. So I'm going to quickly read his bio and then allow them to take the stage. Brandon Frame is the founder and chief visionary officer for the Black Man Can. He is a professor of social emotional learning at Sacred Heart University and the founder of a nonprofit celebrating Black men and boys. Through his leadership, the Black Man Can has impacted over 10,000 Black men and boys globally and created a mentor network of over 500 members. A co-founder of #HitHot, he authored Define Yourself, Redefine the World, and My First Tie. Frame holds a doctorate from Boston University, has earned several awards, and calls Bronx, New York his home. Please give it up for Dr. Brandon Frame. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, or good afternoon, evening, right there in that time there. But really excited to be here. I'm looking forward to the fireside chat, but I wanted to put some remarks together. But first I thought, with everybody's shirts, I have to start with some dad jokes.
Okay.
All right. What did the ocean say to the beach? Nothing. It just waved. Why don't eggs tell jokes?
They crack up?
Because they might crack up. What does a penguin, how does a penguin build its house? It glues it together.
Oh.
All right, so I just want to get that. I saw the chart. We had just dad jokes. I had some dad jokes for today. But I'm really honored to be here. I don't take for granted the opportunity to be in spaces with other men to build, to grow, and to evolve. And so first, I just want to start by asking all the men, all the fathers to stand up. All the fathers, if you could just stand up. Now look around, a little bit look around, and I want you to take this in. You are worthy. You are important. Every day, you wake up and face the world and show up, not just for yourselves, but for your children, your families. I commend you for that. You are pushing through the challenges, the flaws, the insecurities, and I see you. We see you. I want to affirm and honor you for attacking this marathon of fatherhood with the Mamba mentality. You're doing it. All right, you can take a seat. So with these opening remarks, I just want to talk about the idea of presence. Presence specifically of a father in the life of his children. It's something so powerful, yet often underestimated. I know this from personal experience. See, I didn't meet my father until I was 18 years old. Statistically, people might say I shouldn't be standing here with the success that I've been blessed with. But in his absence, I had coaches, mentors who stepped up, who showed me what fatherhood and presence could look like. And when I finally met my father, we built an amazing relationship. In fact, we're season ticket holders to the only team that matters, the Dallas Cowboys. But I know I'm in Wisconsin. We got the Packers and the Badgers. But what I want to emphasize here is that presence can change everything. Earlier this year, I had the honor of walking across the stage to receive my doctorate with my family there to celebrate. Later that same day, I had spent time with my dad, and let me tell you, during those hours, I felt like the little boy I once was, yearning for my father's presence. And even now, with the strong bond we've built, I still felt it, the desire for time that we missed out on. Presence is irreplaceable. And I know I'm speaking to a room full of men who are visionaries, dreamers, doers, and go-getters. You're out here making things happen. And with that comes sacrifice. There's this constant battle we face, going out to get what we need for our families versus just being. Sometimes we focus so much on building the dream that we forget the most valuable thing we can give is ourselves. I'm reminded of this story we once shared on The Black Man Can. A father spoke about how hard he worked to provide the house, the lifestyle, all the things that filled that house. But when he asked his kids what they really wanted, they simply said, "Dad, we wanted you." That's the essence of presence. It's not about the things, the accolades, or the shiny objects. It's about the moments, playing red light, green light in the park, or walking through the door and hearing your kids shout, "Daddy's home, Daddy's home." Trust me, that feeling doesn't last forever. One day they'll stop running to greet you because they'll be on their phones, living their teenage lives. And I know some people in here, some men in here already know what that feels like and what I'm talking about. So as we truly think about this being a man and fatherhood, I kind of broke it down into this three words: meaningful, active, and necessary. So I want you to say it with me. Meaningful, active, and necessary. That's what being a man and being a father should look like. Let's break it down. Meaningful. Your presence must hold meaning. Every single moment, every single second, your words, your actions, they resonate way more than you ever realize. Active. You need to be there physically, emotionally, engaged in your child's life, not just as a figure, but as a participant. And necessary. You are needed. You are needed. There is no replacement for the role you play in your children's lives. Your presence is essential for their growth, their self-esteem, and their understanding of what love looks like. As I wrap up, I want to emphasize that presence is not a passive thing. It requires effort, time, and heart. It's about making sure your children can say, "My dad was there. He was meaningful, he was active, and he was necessary." Fatherhood isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about making sure that the legacy you leave behind is one of love, time, and attention. The legacy you leave behind is one of love, time, and attention. The moments you give, the lessons you taught them, and the way you showed up for them. Let's continue to be meaningful, active, and necessary. Thank you. We'll do a fireside chat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Free. So all of the accolades that Dr. Danielle Hairston-Green mentioned and all the wonderful things that were mentioned, the one thing that was not mentioned, which I think is probably his greatest accolade, was that about a year or so ago, Dr. Brandon Free was a guest on the Black Fatherhood podcast. I think everybody should aspire to be a guest on the Black Fatherhood podcast. That should be the height of everybody's career. I just, not really. Dr. Frame, you mentioned, I really like the acronym, or how you've broken down the acronym for MAN. Meaningful, active, necessary. There's some conversation that suggests that what it means to be a man, what it means to be a father, has changed over time. And it looks very different today. Would you agree with that? How has that changed?
I don't know if I want to use the word changed. I like to use the word evolved.
Okay.
I think that when I think about being the generation they say I'm a part of is the millennial generation. That's like based off my age. And so when I think about previous generations, I know what was taught was like provider and protector, right? That's like a very core essence, but it's evolved to be what provider and protector actually looks like. So it's not just necessarily like the financial piece, right? It looks like, how do you show up emotionally? How are you creating a holding space for your family around their emotions? How are you becoming what one of my guys that I love to read is Jason Wilson, and he talks about being this comprehensive man, right? So it's allowing for fatherhood to be where it's not just the 50% of maybe what we've learned masculinity is, but embracing the full grasp of it, where it's going to be vulnerable, you're going to have empathy, you're going to have compassion, and you're displaying that every single day in your household, so that it's a space where everybody's happy to be at home, right? Home is supposed to be a place. Home is not a place; it's a feeling, right? And the evolution of fatherhood, I believe, is around that emotional intelligence aspect and really embracing that and how that shows up in your household.
So you talked also about presence, but I'm not sure if we quite grasp what presence means, or at least what you're saying it means from the way you're approaching it. We think of presence in its most basic forms as being there, but I think maybe a number of us could think of spaces where our fathers were physically present, but psychologically absent. They were not emotionally involved, they were not available in nurturing ways, but they were physically present. They were providing, they were protecting, they were accomplishing the main tenets of the unspoken social contract for all men, and nothing beyond that. What exactly does presence look like, and how could fathers make sure that their presence actually is presence and not just availability?
I mean, that starts. It's kind of like in my words, just one, being there and then being active in a way where you're thinking about. I was thinking about some of the workshops we went to in terms of just the things that you do on a daily basis and thinking outside the box, which many fathers do. So, like, I talked about the red light, green light, and that's just playing at the park, right? It's not necessarily just going to the park and then you're there. It's, hey, let's play red light, green light, and we're actively doing that. At home is looking like playing the games, making sure that I'm not just at all the recitals, but we're actually practicing together. Not necessarily just going to the games, but we're also out shooting the hoops together. I think all of those things is what presence looks like. It's not necessarily just, again, just showing, just being there, but actually engaging and having those conversations. I think about what does it look like when you pick your child up from school, and it's not just like, oh, how was today, but really engaging them with really thought-provoking questions to figure out what they learned for the day and how they went about learning and what they learned.
So this sounds very intentional. So it can't be incidental that you wake up one morning and you just happen to be playing with your kids, or you just happen to take your kids out to play red light, green light, which I haven't played in a long time. If anybody wants to play red light, green light afterwards, I'm game. But that fatherhood that you're describing has to be very intentional. How does a father who has not had that in his own life step into a space to be that intentionally nurturing, that intentionally involved, that intentionally pouring into his child when that is not a thing that is normal for him?
I think where we're at right now is an example of that, right? It's what fathers in focus and coming to events like this, being a part of Kenneth and in the work that he's doing in those programs, there's those programs that exist so that we can, one, build the brotherhood, so that you also know that you're not on an island by yourselves with your thoughts around what it looks like to be intentional, and get the other ideas and thoughts from other fathers around what they're doing to engage. I think a lot of times as men, we'll sit on an island by ourselves, and we'll suffer in silence with our thoughts. We'll assume that certain thoughts aren't maybe even manly thoughts. And that's not how we should be looking at it. If we take the time to create space where we can learn from each other, we can learn all the things that we need to know to be better fathers, and it's being intentional about that. And I think when I mentioned, I find even with my own friends, we're constantly talking about the battle, like, okay, I gotta go out and I gotta get it, right? I gotta provide, right? But at the same time, I just have to be present, intentionally present with my kids as well, and striking that balance of how I do that, so that they do not walk away or become adults and they're like, oh, my dad really wasn't there. He just worked. I have so many friends that's what their story is like. No, my dad was there, but he was always at work, right? And what we know now is when it comes to, if you work late, the only people that remember that you work late are your family, right? And so we have to switch that narrative and say, and how do you set boundaries there? Like, I know that you have to provide and protect, but again, the only people that remember that you work late is your wife and the kids.
So I love the fact that you're doing work with men and with boys. I can't remember who said it. I forgot the saying, but something about, it might be Lord Baden Powell, about building building boys rather than building men rather than repairing.
It's like it's one of my Frederick Douglass, and it's one of my least favorite quotes. Actually, I actually don't like when people use it.
Talk to me.
Because the way it's used, if you listen to almost any speech where somebody says that, how I interpret it is that a lot of times what they're saying is that men are meant to be left broken.
So you abandon them.
So I kind of abandon, because the thing about people use it in context is usually in the context of working with young boys to build them up. Thus, because men are already broken, they've gone through the trauma, they've experienced all these things in life. So lost cause when that's not the case. And anybody that is doing youth work knows how many more men I need at the table in order to do it, because the work is so vast and the laborers are few, but sometimes the laborers are few because we're leaving men broken. So how are we creating spaces and places so that men are able to be equipped with the tools that they need so that they can be successful professionally and personally?
It's amazing that such a powerful quote can be misappropriated in that kind of way. But I definitely think that there is space to do both and so I'm wondering, we're gathered here as men and people who work with fathers and with families. Are there things that we could be doing with our boys as we're healing ourselves? Are there things that we could be doing with our boys to make sure that the next generation of fathers are not trying to process these same things, not trying to cross these same bridges?
I think about what we talked about this morning, and when Kenneth was giving his speech, and we talked about empathy. And when we think about empathy, and then we add to that social awareness, self-awareness, self-management, and so on, these are social emotional skills. And I think that's the number one thing that we have to, as we're doing programs and we're doing work, when we have a mentoring program, and we're bringing people together, is that even empathy is a skill. We have to 100% hone in on it being a skill, because when we identify it as a skill and not just something that we arbitrarily develop through life, like that's how sometimes we talk about like empathy, you either have it or you don't, through your life experiences, you develop empathy, as opposed to seeing it as a skill, which means it can be what? Taught, right? And so then it becomes in your household, in your programs, how are you teaching it? Simultaneously, how are you creating conditions to reinforce what was taught? Just like if you have a sport, you learn how to shoot the basketball, you learn how to hit the tennis ball, you learn how to hit the baseball, and then you create conditions to practice, right? You learn how to play an instrument, you create conditions to practice. Well, what does it look like, and how do we become more intentional about ensuring that we're teaching empathy and then creating conditions to practice it? We're teaching self-awareness and then creating conditions to practice it. And when that happens, now we have young people and adults who are able to see the social emotional development that they can go through when it comes to empathy and whatnot. So we have to really think again how we're teaching these skills and creating the conditions for them to be practiced and reinforced. And then that allows us to have people, young people, who can talk about their social emotional skills in terms of their strengths, challenges, and needs, alongside their academic skills, which you learn when you're in school, as well as we have to think about how our schools are situated that way as well, because social emotional skills are not prioritized in K through 12 education like they need to be. And so it's thinking about what does that look like as well, because then when it's happening at home and it's happening at school, now think about what our communities will look like.
Thank you very much for that. So you talk about these social emotional skills, you talk about emotional awareness, and I keep thinking to myself, how do you get a man, a father, who has spent his entire life learning how to hold in emotions, deny emotions, to suddenly want to engage that vulnerability in his emotions? How do you get fathers to move over to that space?
Oh, it's a Fathers in Focus conference, and even how can you make even smaller groups? Like I watch women of all races, right? And I spend most of the time with Black women, but I watch women of all races do this. They build community. They get together for everything, right? They get together, they create the community, they talk, they share resources and stuff like that. And a lot of times, just as men, simultaneously, we don't do that, right? And I was sitting today, I sat at a few different tables, and I was just asking some of the men, like, how was today, and whatnot. And like, this was so good, right? Like the rejuvenation, to be able to share resources and find, oh, that brother's doing this, I'm doing that. Now we're going to collab and do something together. I watched that happen today because the space was created. We have to be even more intentional about creating those spaces for men, because a lot of times we're so focused on trying to do the work that we don't seek out the space for community. But when we do, we get there and we're like, oh man, I needed this.
Yeah.
Like that, men actually said that today when I was sitting at that table.
Yeah.
I needed this. This is what I needed. Now I can go back out and do what I need to do. Or even as it was mentioned earlier, when men are well, the household is well, everybody's happy, right? That was the comment that was shared, and it resonated with a lot of people. But creating community spaces for men to come together is how that happens. And a story that I'll share to that, we do this at the Black Men Can. We have all these different spaces. We do these dinners, and so we brought a bunch of men. A lot of times I'm bringing a bunch of men who don't know each other, right? That's the purpose. Is like, I just know these 15 guys should know each other, but they don't know each other. But I know that they should know each other. But one of the questions, they're curated dinners, right? And in the curated dinner, we also have questions that are at every table. And so a man will ask the question, and then he'll respond, and then any other man that wants to respond to it can respond. One of the questions we always ask people to answer is, what's something you're struggling with right now that somebody in the room might be able to help you with? And when you're in a room with a bunch of people, there's the side, like, I don't know if I want to share, but you also should share, because you don't know anybody in the room. You don't know what they do, what their story is. And so one young man, and it's a range, I have a whole range of ages of the men, and a young man, he's 25, and he said, I'm a new dad. I'm the first in my friend group to have kids. I don't know, I'm struggling with my wife. She's going through this thing called postpartum. He said this thing called postpartum. These are his actual words, right? And he's like, I don't know, I'm struggling, right? And then there was another man that was there, and he's a father of 3. And so he said, I know exactly what you're going through. I'm going to give you some advice on some different tactics that I use, that I've learned over time, because I remember being you on my first child, and then I did the work to learn. And then we had like a little group chat, and then the young man he said, everything you said I did, and it worked, and everything's, we might have just saved the marriage, right? We might have just saved the whole relationship, because now he got the information and knowledge that he didn't have, because there wasn't a space that was created for him to come to learn what needed to be learned, so that he could be the best husband and supporter, as well as take care of himself in that process.
Thank you very much for that. So this morning we were listening to a brilliant gentleman, and he was talking about the power of storytelling and how part of this work is through storytelling. He had some really wonderful insights to share with us. I think he's still with us. So I think sometimes being able to grab, it's one thing to hear the theoretical, it's another thing like you were just explaining, to hear how it has worked, how it was processed, and how it might have been needed to be changed along the way to make it work. Can you share a story with us? So think of all the thousands of boys and men that you've worked with and curate one. Can you share a story with us of an instance or a situation where you had a father coming in who had challenges with that vulnerability? It was affecting his relationship with his child's son, and how that work with the father and the son eventually led to better outcomes at the end. So an improved relationship, better connection with his vulnerability.
That's a good question, because there's lots of stories just with the work. One that I can think of is, again, we hold these dinners, right? So it's a big thing. We got to do one here in Madison. A dinner, like a special curated dinner, with questions and everything, right?
The team will make that happen.
We do a dinner here in Madison, and so, but at this dinner, again, I bring men together, and so in the conversation, we got into the conversation around therapy, right? And so I would say half the room had done therapy, the other half maybe not done the therapy. But also still sharing challenges. And so we had another dad who was talking about my son's a teenager now, just going back and forth with the teenager aspect of things. And the gentleman was like, most of them were like, one thing that really helped me unpack everything to be a better father is to go to therapy, right? And then he was on that side. We have the stigma that does exist within many communities, especially the Black community, and he was Caribbean as well, so you got the Black and the Caribbean aspect of it. We don't do that. We don't talk to people about our things. And so one of the guys in there was an actual therapist, and he said, and this is the power of community, he said, I'm going to give you 2 free sessions, right? I want you to come. I think the work that we can do together will help move you in terms of the relationship that you're looking to build with your son, in terms of the challenges. And so fast forward, that happened, and then we had these group chats. Like I unpacked my own childhood trauma, because a lot of times that's where it stems from. And now I'm able to have some much more fruitful and powerful conversations with my son. And again, this goes back to the power of community and why we have to create these spaces for us to come together to learn and grow and evolve. Because when we do, magical things happen.
Thank you so much for that. I do want to keep my promise and leave a space for a few questions. So we probably have enough space for maybe 2 or 3 questions from the audience.
Can I just yell? Can you guys hear me back there?
Yeah, I think we probably was a little recorded too.
So we're in a space now where the folks that we're serving are getting younger and younger. And so our parents now, our Gen Zers are now moving into childbearing ages and relationship. And Alpha Gens are very close behind them. What are some of the challenges you're seeing in the theories that you've seen around working with particularly Black boys before and this new age of boys that are now coming through? Are there some challenges that you didn't expect to see but you're now seeing?
Gen Z, Gen Alpha, I think when I spend, the more time I spend with them, and we did talk about this a little earlier, you see really how social media has really impacted our worlds. What I find is the notion of, or a quote that I use with them as we do work is, don't let social media rush you. Because that's what I find with our Gen Z and our Gen Alpha, with the work, whether it's professional and even like how they move in the world, is everything should happen tomorrow. Like if I'm gonna be a great dad, I should be a great dad tomorrow, as opposed to the work that it actually takes. If I want to have the career, I graduated from college, I'm supposed to have a 6-figure job like the next day, like upon graduation. And we all know, and millennial and up there, it just don't really work like that. Even if you start your own business, it usually doesn't even work that way. And so we spend a lot of time talking about short-term and long-term goals, and really spending, like, I think even in schools it's not as talked about as much in terms of our goal setting and planning, and we're spending a lot of time talking about what does it look like to plan for the future, what does it look like to put in hard work, and what does it look like to not let social media rush you, what is it to remind them that comparison is the thief of joy. So that is something else. They're looking at other people's lives and things that they have, whether they're faking the funk online or not, and thinking that that's supposed to be my life, when is my blessing supposed to come, as opposed to what does the hard work actually look like to take the step-by-step approach, create a strategic plan of what is the next step to get to the ultimate end goal.
Thank you very much. I think we have 2 other questions.
Okay, my question is, we asked the question earlier in one of those rooms that, because we didn't break it down like, okay, this absent father, and then these fathers that, have got, kids that have lost a father through death, it's not the same outcome or the same trauma. So can you maybe touch on that a little bit, the difference, if you ever seen the difference in those kids, in those situations?
So that we've seen a few different things. So some of our programs that we have are in juvenile facilities. So that's one aspect of an area where we're spending a lot of time, is with young men who are actually currently incarcerated, who are 17, 18 years old, who experience that. And many of them, that's their story. So one, we're thinking, what does it look like to work with those young men who, in the program we had this past summer, and the one that currently goes on, we have 60 boys in the program. 40 of them are actually fathers. They're all under 18, and they are dads, and they also have that story that you're mentioning, that in terms of where their own growing up process, in terms of not having a dad or lost a father. And so it really comes down to these intentional programs where you have boys coming in, and we focus on the social emotional skill. Like, that's literally, we have a whole curriculum, and it's constant work around their social emotional development, bringing in mentors. So the program is all run by Black men. They're all entrepreneurs who are coming in to work with the boys and providing a constant flow. We also do virtual meetings where we have men who were formerly incarcerated, who are videoing in to share their stories of how when they got out, how they moved through entrepreneurship and how they moved as they've gotten out. And even for the boys who are in our programs that are in regular K through 12 schools, the same thing. We are making sure that we're constantly bringing in this flow of mentors and men to work with them and share their stories, then work through the curriculum, give them all the tools so they start their own businesses. That's what it looks like. The problem with the work, that this work, is that it's expensive. That's like the challenge that you're speaking to, is like, it's super expensive because it's people work. AI is not going to solve Black male achievement. Like, AI is cool, everybody's thinking about it, but it's not. Like, it's people work. It takes every single man here to be spending time with boys and still trying to provide for your own children and make sure that they have, right? One of the things, as we talk about the evolution of fatherhood, is thinking about, like, if you are a man and you have your family, and then there's boys that your son plays with, no matter what their age is, and they don't have a father, you have to actually step in and be the father, because you know why? Because there's going to be times where your kids are over their house, and the things that you teach and everything, they're going to not be there. So now you have other kids that have to come into your fold and into your space in order to move them forward. Again, this is people work. When we're talking about fatherhood and we're talking about Black male achievement and moving our boys forward and navigating those challenges, it's super expensive work because it takes people. AI and tech is not going to solve our challenges, especially around building our boys and growing our men.
So we have 2 people standing. We'll take these last 2 questions and then we'll end. Thanks.
So I want to know, what is your viewpoint or your idea for creating a safe space for males, all age groups, all ethnicities, for saying that it's okay to express their mental capacity, that it's okay to cry, it's okay to feel. And I know that in some of the workshops that I've been in today, we've talked about and discussed, it's good to have a team or a brotherhood or a group to share the space to cultivate this relationship. What is your viewpoint on that?
My viewpoint is that we have to create groups for our young men to be mentored. We need to create groups where they are learning explicit and intentional social emotional skills. So there's a few things you can take away from what I said, but when we start really digging into social emotional learning, right, and depending on what state you live in, it's a word, it really depends on what state you live in. People use it as a divisive topic, you can't talk about it in schools, but the truth of the matter is if we take everybody in this room and we go back to your middle school and high school days, I'm pretty sure, I don't know everybody's age in here, but I'm just looking at the room, if we go back to your middle school and high school days and I ask you, how are you doing with your social emotional skills? First, how you're doing academically. You're gonna be able to tell me, your strengths, challenges, and things. You can be like, oh, well, I'm really good at math, maybe not so good at science, whatever it might have been. I'm a straight A student, whatever your academic strengths and challenges where you can speak to it, give some sort of response. If I were to ask you, going back to middle school and high school days, and I say, how are you doing with your social emotional skills? What are your strengths, challenges, and needs? Most of the room, you can probably be like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not something we do. That is problematic, right? And so that's still happening today. So we have to create the spaces where our boys are getting that intense social, emotional development because there's things that are inevitable in life aside from like death and taxes, right? One is mental health challenges are inevitable, right? You see Inside Out, it's there. It's mental health, learning new things, inevitable. And guess what? When you learn new things, that's frustrating, right? And then conflict. You're gonna have conflict with yourself and you're gonna have conflict with other people. How do you navigate all three of those things? Your social emotional skills. The Pythagorean theorem is not helping you get through any of that, right? And so how are we ensuring that students are learning these explicit and intentional social emotional skills so that we can navigate all these things, but also then as we come together, we can look at the political divide in our countries because we have not prioritized social emotional skill development, right? And then again, we definitely have not even created a space for men to allow for their social emotional skills to be out there. Every woman in this room has a story, personally or professionally, around a man who is like, his social emotional skills wasn't that great. And even men might have a story too, but every woman has a story. And unfortunately for some of the women, those are violent stories, right? Every single, this is a gender interrace thing, but every single school shooting has been done by who? Right? So there's a gender interrace thing, but it's a gender thing too. Like it's males. We haven't seen a woman do it yet. Right? And so what are we doing? When you start hearing about the kid, you start hearing about their story and social emotional skills or the lack thereof, right? So we have to really think about what does that look like for all of us as men, right? In terms of prioritizing our social emotional development in a way that allows for us to be the men that we need to be for ourselves, for our families, for community, and for society.
Final question. Thank you very much for that.
Hi, thank you. I recently listened to the podcast, The Problem with Boys and Men in America. And one of their solutions or issues is that young men, especially young men of color, do not have mentorship or teachers at a young age. And my 2-year-old son, for the first time in his daycare, he has a male caregiver, and then a male of color caregiver. He says Mr. Malik more than he says Mama now. So I'm a little jealous of Mr. Malik, but I'm really happy he has a role model. But how do we encourage men to go into childhood development or be a teacher, a kindergarten teacher, or elementary school teacher, to provide that mentorship, that other type of mentorship that fatherhood?
Absolutely, I love that. Me and Ken were talking about the grant. The grant I'm working on that prioritizes grades 3 through 5 specifically. I think to your question, there is one around career pipeline development, right, that we have to do for our men and boys to see education as a pathway. A lot of times when you ask boys or even men, like, why wouldn't you be a teacher or something like that, they usually go to the pay side of things. And I think, I know it is varied by state, I understand that. However, it's actually rather more lucrative than most people think in terms of what you can make as a teacher, especially when you start throwing in overtime and then you throw in, like, oh, you don't work summers and whatnot. But I really do think it is around how we're creating pipelines and programs for men to be in the educational space in particular. Because as I go, like, I went to Morehouse College, as mentioned, and they just started their educational studies program, right? And so they should have had an educational studies program a long time ago. But now you have programs that are allowing for men of color to be able to, you have Call Me Mr., Profound Gentleman, right? All these things are out there. And so how are we, amplifying that is something that me and Keth were talking about as well, is that the Black Man Can has over 1 million followers on Instagram. So with that, I'm able to put we do almost 7-8 million impressions of our content monthly. So when we're amplifying these programs and places, and then how do you do the recruitment so that people know about it and see it as a viable pathway into the middle class, if you will. And so I think sometimes we don't. It's like finance, it's business. And again, I was a business major because Morehouse didn't have the program then, but while I was in school, that's when I realized like my talents and the impact that I wanted to make was in education and development, and I followed through on that, but showing young Black males the pathway, because you might only be the kindergarten teacher for 3 or 4 years, right? It's your entry-level job, right? And how do we continue to build on that? Like, you can be a preschool teacher, but then you might even end up running a school. You can end up becoming a superintendent. All these things end up being the pathway that I think we have to share with our young men. And when we've done that, they start to see, okay, again, going back to the issue, right? Sometimes a little bit with the Gen Z, Gen Alpha, the time that it takes to actually amass the work, to amass what we want, like the house, everything is just it just happens a little later, right? Even with millennials, you see that now. There was lots to talk about when I was the age of Gen Alpha and everything, but people just get married a little later now. People don't get married as early as they used to. People are buying homes a little later, and so because there's so much work, and then as we all know, the cost of everything is going up and wages are not. So that plays a role.
Morehouse does turn out world changes. Morehouse. Thank you very much, Morehouse brother. Thank you very much, Dr. Frame, for an excellent discussion. Thank you very much for your engagement.
Good stuff.
Thank you very much again. We want to express our tremendous gratitude to all of our sponsors for making this conference possible. We thank UW Health, United Way of Dane County, the Healthy Brain and Child Development Study, University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Medicine and Public Health, the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, the Reproductive Equity Action Lab, the School of Social Work, and great thanks to our platinum sponsor, the School of Human Ecology. A handful of our sponsors. We also want to thank the persons who have carried this vision for the last couple of years and have worked diligently to make it a reality. Dr. Danielle Hairston-Green, co-chair and visionary, Ella Accra, one of our very few subcommittee chairs who took on just a ton of work and carried the vision with us. Kevin Murphy, Rhonda Davis, and the full army of volunteers who made today as streamless and as seamless a task as possible. There were very few hiccups, and whatever few there were, the volunteers made it so easy to transition that most people did not see where the hiccups existed. Thank you very much, volunteers. And without this group of people, this conference would not exist. To all of you who have given of your time and your energy to be here with us today, I thank you so much for making this a reality. Thank you. So go out and tell the world what you have experienced. And I hope you will commit to making this even bigger in 2025. So ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the close of day. And I want to share a few words of challenge with you to motivate you as you go home and as you continue to think about the things that you have heard and experienced here. I'm filled with a profound sense of hope and determination. I hope you will look back with pride to have been part of history. You were a key part in the success of this first ever Fathers in Focus Conference. And we look forward to making this Fathers in Focus Conference an annual activity that gathers fathers from across Wisconsin, Delaware, the rest of the state, the US, and the world to Madison to celebrate, to be supported, to be challenged. But today we have shared our stories, our struggles and our triumphs. We have learned from one another and strengthened our resolve to be the best fathers that we can be. And as we prepare to return to our families and our children, I challenge you to resolve to be the best human being that you can be, to be the best men that you can be, to be the best fathers that you can be. We live in a time when the role of fathers is challenged most fiercely, while the benefits of the father role is needed so acutely. Up, you mighty men, for there is a momentous task at hand. If you want to make an impact on the world, look no further than your child. If you want to establish legacy, look no further than your child. If you want to change the future of your family, look no further than your child. And if you want to write history, there is no richer canvas than your child. So up, you mighty men. This is more than a call to action. It is a declaration of strength, of potential, of an unwavering commitment to fatherhood, to generation change, to nation building. Each of us holds within the power to shape the future, to mold minds and hearts, to change our children's trajectories. And our children look to us not just for guidance, but for inspiration, for the courage to dream and the strength to persevere. But before we utter one word, by our very lives and actions, we would have taught our children lessons they will not so easily forget. Fathers in Focus. Teach your children that their emotions are important. Teach them that their voice matters. Teach them to be honest with themselves and with others. To thine own self be true. Teach your children to care for others as they care for themselves. Teach them that there is love and beauty in this world, but to be strong and stand against darkness that is a threat to all of us. but teach them with few words. Live these ideals honestly in the presence of your children. Up, you mighty men. There is a task at hand. Fathers in focus. In the quiet moments of our lives, when the world seems still, it is our actions that speak volumes. It is in the bedtime stories, the shared laughter, the soothing of a bruised knee, the full belly laughs, the wiping of snotty sniveling noses, the reviewing of homework and navigating the challenges of friendships and bullying, the lessons taught and learned. It is here that we make our stand. It is here that we build the foundation of our children's futures. Up, you mighty men. Let these words echo in your hearts as you return to your families, as you face the challenges and joys of fatherhood. Up, you mighty men, for we are the pillars of our homes, the steady hands that guide our children through the storms of life. Our influence extends beyond the walls of our homes, shaping communities and ultimately our nation and the world. Up, you mighty men. Embrace this responsibility with pride and determination. Let us be the example our children need, the heroes that they look up to, and the men that they aspire to become. Return to your family renewed. Return to your children inspired. Return to your communities fortified and connected. And as we leave this conference, let us carry with us the lessons learned, the bonds formed, the commitment to be better, to be vulnerable, to be stronger, to be more present in our children's lives. Up, you mighty men. We do not fear vulnerability or weakness or our shortcomings. We embrace them and grow through them. We use them to connect with each other and to fertilize the ground from which our children will grow. Up, you mighty men. Let this be a rallying cry, our promise to ourselves and to our children. Fathers in focus. Together, we can create a legacy of love, of strength, of wisdom, of change. Together we carry and rise with the challenge of fatherhood, not just as individuals, but as a force, a united force for good. So up, you mighty men. Up, you mighty men. Up, you mighty men. Let us rise. Let us lead. Let us inspire.